Okay, let's start. I'm going to look at pressing record, and then we're going to kick off with the discussion on the assignment brief today with regards to the first unit. Now, obviously, I know that some of you have been patient, and I do appreciate that you have joined on time. And I'm going to ask everyone from the next sessions to be on time as well. Right, let's look at pressing record, and then we will start. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's session on the assignment discussion for the first unit that we are completing, which is how businesses operate. What you can see on your screen essentially is, the assignment brief, which is also available on Moodle. And this assignment brief primarily gives you details of what is to be, compiled as a report in terms of completing the assignment and achieving the unit. Now, just to basically look at giving you some brief tips with regards to, how to go about doing the assignment. Now, first of all, some of you, might be looking at doing the assignments, for the first time or after a long time, let me put it this way. Now, keeping that in mind, what I want to be able to do is essentially give you tips in terms of how you are going to look at doing the assignment, how you're going to look at compiling the evidence, and once this evidence is compiled, whereabouts do you go about submitting the evidence, and how you would get feedback, how you would receive your final grade. Now, there are a lot of things that I want to show you. So this session is going to be covering a lot of aspects. So feel free to ask me questions as we go along in terms of our discussion. Now, a couple of things that I want to go ahead and obviously mention upfront would be with regards to looking at, how this is to be done. And I'm going to show you how the assignment is going to be done. Now, if you look at the assignment brief, just very briefly on this part, when you look at the assignment brief, there are a couple of things that we need to be aware of. One, this is the name of the unit. This is the awarding organization, ATHE. So when we do the assignment document, we're going to start by writing the name of the unit. And then obviously there are lots of different tasks which are given in the unit, like task 1. We have some basic activities, some extension activities. Because this is a graded qualification, what you're going to be looking at is that when we do these tasks, you have the opportunity to differentiate your grade by not just receiving a pass, but also a merit or a distinction. So some part of the activities when you do would be asking you to prepare different types of evidence. Now, when I look at different types of evidence, what I mean by that here is that essentially when I look at this particular task, it is going to ask you to make a PowerPoint presentation, right? That means you will create a PowerPoint slide, and then you will be doing this task, and this task. Now, extension activities are activities which we saw in the unit specification brief, and I'm going to open that as well just to show you so that we are clear in terms of what that means and how does it relate to the assignment brief. Now, if I share my full screen for a second so that you're able to see pretty much everything that we want to discuss and talk about. Let me just share and organize my screen. So here we go. Now, when I share my screen with you guys, what you're going to be able to see is a lot of things with regards to what we're discussing. Now, this is where, if you look at the assignment brief, this is where the unit specification is. And then as you can see, there are some tasks which are given here for pass, merit, and distinction. The extension activities are essentially merit and distinction, which are given throughout the assignment brief. So if you look at explain how businesses differ from different organizations, provide examples to illustrate your answer, this is what it is given here. Then you say distinction, provide a handout. It is providing, asking you to prepare something, but obviously the task is the same. So analyze the impact of current national and global environments on businesses in your named country. And that is the same task here. Now, in addition to what the task is given in terms of, looking at defining what the evidence is to be produced, what you'll also see is this is a task, but in terms of the evidence, it says provide a handout. You have to illustrate with examples. Now, this gives you the clues in terms of what evidence in terms of document has to be produced to achieve these tasks. And this is something that you need to be careful about when you're attempting the assignment, because if you attempt the assignment as per the brief given and follow it through in terms of what is being asked to produce as a document, you are going to achieve the unit and submit the assignment correctly the first time. Now, this particular flow will follow through in, I would say, the entire assignment brief. So if I look at task 2 now, and you would see task 2, it says business functions. Here, the delegates are required to produce. What is it required to produce? Information sheet. And then there are some merit and distinction activities which are covering LO3. Now, if I go to the task 3, accounting workshop, it is going to cover interpret the accounting information on profit and loss account, which is this task, and the merit and distinction activities would cover these 2 tasks which are highlighted here in the. So obviously, because we are looking at here the analysis and interpretation and creating of a profit and loss sheet or a financial statement, it is understood that you're going to be looking at producing what is called a workbook or a spreadsheet essentially. And this spreadsheet would essentially allow you to show calculations which are required to be done to achieve this task. Task 4 is talking about, producing a Word document, because here you need to be able to write the results of your work. So it is going to be a Word document. And essentially, this is again covering some of the tasks 4.1 to 4.4, and then extension activities will cover the merit and the distinction task. Last task is primarily task 5. Task 5, or when you look at the learning outcome 5, is actually being merged here in terms of looking at the business functions, which is the role of HR. So that is covered here. And task 5 essentially will look at covering learning outcome 6, which is customer services. And obviously here again, 2 basic tasks, 2 bullet points, which are highlighting 6.1 and 6.2. And the merit and distinction activities are given separately here. So this is the assignment brief, which we are looking at attempting for this particular unit. Now, couple of things that I want to show in terms of what has come out of this assignment brief. So what I've done now is I've converted this assignment brief. I'm not going to be looking at, essentially now, showing you the assignment brief and the unit specification, because this is available on Moodle. I have converted what we see here into a PowerPoint presentation, both of these. So we are going to discuss this with the PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to make the screen a bit more visible by, resuming to show you just the PowerPoint presentation. Now here, if we look at, essentially, looking at how we are going to do the assignment and what is required to be done, there are a couple of things that you're going to look at in the assignment brief. Now, the assignment brief is going to ask you to cover theory. It's going to ask you to show or show an application of the theory, and then it'll ask you to add examples in terms of your understanding. Now, for the purposes of assessment, when we look at purposes of marking and assessment. Now, for the purposes of marking and assessment, as a lecturer, as a tutor, what I'm going to be looking at doing is primarily looking at if you have produced the evidence in this particular format. Task 1 was asking PowerPoint presentation. Task 2 is an information sheet. Task 3 requires you to work on a spreadsheet. And then we have task 4, which is a Word document. Task 5, which is the customer service, learning outcome. It is asking you to produce what is called a PowerPoint presentation, a few slides. Now, when we look at slides, we are looking at 10 to 12 slides here. And similarly, when we look at customer service, we're looking at 5 to 7 slides here. Now, this is being done primarily because we want to make sure that we are clear in terms of what we need to produce. And when you produce this output, it is going to meet the requirement criteria of meeting a specific grade for your assignment. So this is something that you have to keep in mind, that when we talk about writing the assignment, you have to keep this in mind, that there are going to be some of the tasks that you're going to do, and these tasks are required to produce, asking you to produce evidence in different formats. So they are going to be a combination of three things: a PowerPoint presentation, it is going to be an information sheet, which is like a table on a Word document, and then it is going to be using spreadsheet and again a Word document. So as you can see, two places you have to use Word document, two places you have to use and create a PowerPoint presentation, and in one place you have to look at producing a spreadsheet. Now, there are some useful tips that I want to share with you in terms of how you're going to go about presenting and working on your assignment, right? One of the things which I would mention is that when you look at preparing your assignment, look at formatting and structure of your document. So it's a good practice for you to start with an introduction to explain what company or organization you're going to be taking for the purposes of doing the assignment. Now, if I just look at showing you something for a minute, going back to the assignment brief again and the unit specification, what you're going to see is that in the unit specification, sometimes it will say a named country. It will say a named business. So essentially, for the purposes of your assignment, you're going to be looking at shortlisting first a named business or a country. So obviously, we're all in the UK. We're going to be looking at United Kingdom as the country, and at the same time, we are going to be looking at choosing an organization that we are aware of for the purposes of taking an example. And when you start writing your document and start making a presentation, make sure we use font size 12. Aslam, I would ask you to mute your microphone, right? We are going to be looking at, obviously looking at using font size 12 and then making sure that you are, obviously drawing up a table of contents. And as a good practice, you're writing a conclusion towards the end in terms of what you understood by completing the assignment for this unit. It is a good practice. Obviously, we want to learn this as a technique that in the UK, when you do most of your work and submit assignments in university and colleges, you'd be required to do referencing, which is basically the ability to include or get work from other places like books, journals, website, but you have to give credit to the authors who have actually written, created, or produced that work. And that bit is called referencing. So Harvard referencing is important. Anything that you cut, copy, paste needs to be referenced. If you're copying and pasting exactly as it is, you have to include them in direct quotes and then write the name of the author and the year in which it was published in order to avoid plagiarism and similarity. And if you're reading it and writing it in your own words, that's called paraphrasing. You still need to reference the work. And again, here we follow what is called the Harvard referencing system. Now, there are no word limits in the assignment. You can submit technically an assignment to me for 10,000 words, 5,000 words, that's all okay. But we want to do intelligent work. We want to make sure that we are not writing too much. We are making sure that we are not plagiarizing the work. What we want to be able to do is create and do the assignment in a certain amount of word limit. So that is where I've written down, when you say PowerPoint slides, 10 to 12 slides, when we talk about a Word document, you're looking at about 500 words. When we talk about a spreadsheet, you're looking at about 200 words to explain. Again, a Word document, I would say about 500 words. So if I include all this, probably in terms of you doing the assignment, we're probably looking at about 3,500, 4,000 words as an assignment, in three different formats: a spreadsheet, a PowerPoint presentation, and a Word document to be emailed across for the purposes of assessment and marking. And depending on if you're looking at achieving merit or distinction, you might have to increase the word limit slightly, and that would primarily be looking at giving analysis or showing the application of a theory or a framework that you've used, like, for example, team building model. If we talk about Tuckman's model or the roles of Dr. Belbin team roles, you might have to take an example, give an application like we discussed the event or a charity event. And in those cases, the word limit will go up slightly because you're including examples and showing the application of theory and framework while doing the assignment. Now, one of the other things that I would suggest is always focus on what is called command verbs. Now, every task, you will see, as I mentioned this earlier, will be having what is called a command verb. And I will discuss this in a bit more detail, is because when we talk about command verbs tend to be words which basically define what the task is asking you to do. And the reason the command verb is there is, to allow you to do justification in terms of how much to write and how much is too much and how much is too less. Now, let me quickly switch you over to one other document which I want to draw your attention towards, and that is called the command verb document, which is available on Moodle. Now, what we have done is we have organized the document into three different parts. First is words which basically describe most of the past tasks in the assignment brief. The second page is merit task, and the third merit words, and the third page is distinction words. Now, what you would see is that if you know the definition of the word, it will help you in compiling the evidence for that particular task. And when we look at explain, for example, one of the tasks which says explain different structures within a business. Now, what does explain mean? We need to set out in detail the meaning of something with reasons. So if we talk about different structures of businesses, like a horizontal structure, a vertical structure, a hierarchical structure, a flat structure, we will need to give maybe a diagram of it to show what the structure means. And at the same time, we'll be looking at explaining it in 20 to 30 words, the meaning of what that structure is or how that structure works within an organization. And towards the end, you could also say that this structure is something which I've seen in Amazon, or this is a structure which I've seen in a local grocery store. And that helps to close the argument when we look at explain. And we'll discuss this in a bit more detail as we go along, when we discuss the assignment brief. So this is quite important. And I put, if you know the words and the meaning of the words, you're able to compile the evidence of the assignment correctly the first time. Now, if I tell you that, go away and do your assignment, but my instructions to you in terms of going away and doing the assignment aren't very clear. They are very generic. Now, if I tell you, can you go away and attempt task 1.1 by filling this document? The instructions are very clear that I've been asked to do the assignment, but in that assignment, I've been asked to do task 1.1. And along with that, in order to complete task 1.1, I've been asked to complete this template which has been provided. So as you can see, the instructions that are provided would make a lot of difference in terms of your understanding of how you have to go about doing the task. And the same work is done by the command verb when I say and discuss tasks as we go along in the assignment. The next bit which I want to show you is that there is something called the assignment declaration. And this assignment declaration is something that you need to fill. This is something that you can download from Moodle. And this would basically be a declaration of your statements to say this is your own piece of work. You have understood what is plagiarism. You have not colluded or worked with somebody else to create this assignment. You have ensured that you have done appropriate referencing or paraphrasing in order to give credit to authors or books or articles or journals or website or sources from which the data has been taken. And then you are submitting this work which meets the college regulations. So you write your name on the top, you write your student registration number, you write the course name, which is ATHE Level 3 Diploma in Business. Then you write the assignment name, which is 3.23, how businesses operate. You tick all the boxes and sign at the bottom. And this is a declaration that you would need to submit along with the assignment. Now, to make it easier, what we've also done is made these declarations on the website. So all you would need to do is just fill it once. If you follow this link, copy and paste it in the browser, what you will see is this will take you to the website. And here, if you write your awarding body registration number, if you haven't received that, my suggestion would be, again, drop an email to litc@ukversity.co.uk, and that would mean that somebody from the admin team, either Marie, Dania, Amrita, or Victor, will email you the registration number, and that number will remain consistent for the full course. So it is a registration number. If you haven't got registration number, so let me put this down in the chat for registration number, email litc@ukversity.co.uk. Okay, now this can also be filled up here. So assuming you want to fill this up as one time, my suggestion would be write the awarding body number 25, and it is normally a combination like this. your courses, level 3 diploma in business, tick all the boxes here because you're going to be doing one declaration for all the units, and then tick all the boxes here. You write your email. So I've got Chaudhary chaudhurym.aslam.65@gmail.com. I would write his number as well. So assuming you have a number, and I would write the number, and then you can either sign with the mouse. If you're doing it on your phone, you can sign it here and then press submit. And this will submit the assignment declaration that you have submitted, and this will be used while we look at obviously submitting and presenting your work for the purposes of certification. Now, once this has been done, we get into the assignment brief, and let's have a quick discussion in terms of how you would go about doing the assignment which is required to be done. Now, in the assignment brief, you would have noticed that there is a scenario which is given. The scenario is that you need to primarily be able to assume that this is something that you're required to be doing when you are essentially looking at doing the assignment. Now, that is what is called a scenario. So the awarding organization here is giving you a scenario. Now, this is not important and not a must to be followed, because if you're working and if you have years of experience, you can use your own organization or your own place of work to basically put that scenario into the assignment, because some of the tasks will require you to practically explain what is required to be done. So in those cases, you would need an organization, a company, a business to mention, and your role, and that is where the scenario comes in handy. Now, it says here you're working as you've received a placement to work with the local Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce every year runs professional advisory services for local businesses and government-funded businesses. And as a business development manager, your main aim is to improve the education program for young people hoping to set up their own business. And you have planned a series of induction workshops, which are going to be introduction to business. And then you have been asked to prepare this material, which is a PowerPoint presentation, a spreadsheet, an information sheet, a Word document, and that would be used for making presentation as a business development manager to a series of young people who are looking at starting their own businesses. So the scenario gives you two aspects. One, where you work, what you're working as your role, and why are you required to produce these tasks, and in what format, and how would you be presenting it. So think of that situation in mind and then go about producing the evidence. Now, assuming I've got 25 years of experience, I have been a teacher, I've worked in sales, I've been in product marketing, I've worked in head offices, large corporations like Samsung and Fujitsu. So I have lots of experience. I might not need to follow this, assuming if I've worked in BAC or Marks and Spencer or Tesco or PC World and Currys or any other store, like I run my own business, then I might not need to have this scenario in mind. But this gives me a bit of a background that what is it that we are looking at getting into by assumption of looking at doing some of these tasks. Now, the tasks are quite straightforward. When you look at the learning outcomes and the presentations that we have done and covered during the discussion of this unit, they're all quite directive in the sense they are basically related to what has been discussed in the assignment brief. Now, the first bit that we have to do is produce a PowerPoint presentation which will discuss the business environment for that business, because it talks about UK or a named country, and it will talk about a named business. We can't do generic discussion here. So we have to talk about the different types of organizations and how they would essentially, be looking at doing business and what is business environment. And that is what we have to discuss as far as this task is concerned. Now, if I look at discussing this particular task, and if I look at how we go about essentially doing this bit of work, what I would do is basically show you an example of how this has been produced, by a learner. And what we have to do is basically prepare a PowerPoint presentation, and in that PowerPoint presentation, go about doing these tasks one by one. So let me just share my screen and then put you on to another presentation. Now, this is task one, which the learner has done. I would look at he or she has made a couple of slides. I would look at doing a few amendments in this particular presentation slide, following the tips that I've given. Number one, I'm going to insert a new slide and I'm going to say 3.23, how businesses operate, right? And this is an assignment for task 1, and this is submitted by, say, Chowdhury Aslam, right? And then you write your registration number. Now that should be the first slide. So I would not say made by and do all this. And here what I would do is write an introduction, because the learner here has actually talked about an introduction about the tasks which have been asked to be done. So the first task, if I now share my full screen, just to make sure that you're able to see everything that we're discussing. So if I look at the first task here on the assignment brief, it says describe the type of organizations. And here in the first task 1.1, the learner has started about talking about the organization, and she has actually taken Iceland Foods Limited as a company to discuss the different types of organizations which are present in the UK, because she has mentioned UK as a market, and she's taken a company based in the UK to discuss this particular task that she's submitting. Now, she's also talked about the business environment, because that's task 2. It talks about identify the named business and describe how local and national and global economic changes affect the market. So she has done some discussion on this particular aspect. Now, going into the types of businesses, as you can see, she has described limited companies, sole traders, partnerships, limited partnership, not-for-profit, and that have been discussed with regards to the types of organization. Now, when we go about discussing business environment, that slide is there. Then we talk about some of the different structures and the reason why businesses are set up like this, in terms of why a private business, why a limited business. She discussed some of the objectives of why different types of ownerships of businesses are required and why they are required to be set up like that. And then she has done some justification in terms of position of business, distinction between profit and non-profit, growth stages. And then she's come to the second task, which is talking about organizational structures. So she's talked about 3 types: hierarchical, flat, and matrix. But if you see, she hasn't discussed them in a bit more detail. Now it says explain. Just writing hierarchical is not going to be able to achieve this task. So if I then open a browser and if I go in here and then type hierarchical structure, what I would need to be able to do essentially is, include the structure of the organization to show that this is hierarchical structure. So hierarchical structure, I bring this in. As you can see, in one slide, probably you'll have to make 3 slides here. So when I look at hierarchical structure, I would basically go about putting the structure here, and then, look at essentially talking about, what is hierarchical structure. So I need to write 10 to 15 words just to describe what is, hierarchical structure. So here, if I've taken this up, from this particular slide, then what we need to be able to do is basically, look at some description of what hierarchical structure, is when we talk about a particular type of an organization. So hierarchical structures are typically structures which are basically going to show departments and levels. So your workers, your frontline workers, then your managers, you have senior managers, your management, and you have the board. So the purpose of this structure, and at different levels, different decision makings are done, is basically something that you need to be able to describe in a hierarchical structure. So assuming if I copy this as it is, what I need to be able to do is describe it in the footnotes somewhere here. And that would help complete, discussion about the structures. And then she has talked about the business environment. So I'm going to reorder some part of it briefly, because she should reorder the slides, because, you start about the ownership of business, objectives, you make the objectives first, then you go to the ownership, position, growth stages, then go to organizational structures 1.2, and then go to 1.3. And that would essentially be talking about the local and global, national and local and global economic environment changes, which Iceland can actually have, like rise of inflation, change of exchange rate for sterling versus dollar, if they're importing goods from European countries, the impact of Brexit. These are things which you can discuss, and she's put a few points on, and then she's put few external, influences as well. So internal and external. Now, what she's missed out is she's missed out on putting references. Where has this, text come from? So references are a must, which need to be included in order to give credence and credit to the work that you have taken or you have included in your own work, and you're calling it that this is something I've submitted. But that has to be done. So you need to have references for this particular task that you are submitting. So this is how you'll go about creating a PowerPoint presentation. Start with an introduction slide, an opening slide, an introduction. I would also go to a certain extent and put, the tasks on top of the slides before I actually start. Reason I would put it this way is that this would clearly, give a bit of structure, to your work, because you're doing it in a way wherein it makes it easier, for the lecturer to assess your piece of work and see what was the task and what is something that you have actually presented in covering that. So I would be obviously looking at putting, these tasks down in terms of ensuring that, they are something which basically give a sign. It's like signposting, essentially, which basically talk about signposting what evidence is being produced against what type of tasks which are being submitted, by you for the purposes of meeting the assignment and marking criteria. So this would be a best practice, and I would suggest that you write the task down and then obviously start describing it towards the end. Make sure you add references, and this would complete task 1 for this particular assignment. Now, if you can see, she has not attempted in detail, some of the extension activities, although they are there. Now, she talks about the reasons in terms of why business objectives differ. So again, here she has covered the explanation in terms of business objectives, as you can see, but because she hasn't written it clearly, I can't interpret that this is 1M1 task which she's trying to do. But because she hasn't described it, I wouldn't say that this has been achieved. So here you have to write about 30 to 50 words to explain, why businesses have different objectives and how they can, be set up on the basis of ownership to achieve those business objectives. Then it says provide a handout to analyze the impact of current national and, international changes for a named country. Now here again, as you can see, what she has done is that she has provided no handout, and that would mean that, again, the distinction activity of the task has not been done. Now she talks about the impact of current national and global environment, but very, very briefly. So if, as you can see, the introduction of the PESTEL framework has been done, I have provided a handout to you, but again, this has been generically covered and there is an absence of example, so I would probably put it this way: because it talks about a named country, it needs to have an example to be able to have this task achieved. 1T1. So I would say not achieved because she hasn't taken a named country and she's only described it generically because of the PESTEL framework mentioned. So although she has attempted merit and distinction activities, but they are not achieved, but she has been able to, assuming these changes are done on the structure slides, by including some words to refer to the slides, which will across the 10 to 12 slides cover about 500 words to explain what have been written on the slides, would help her achieve a comfortable pass, for this particular task. Now, in task 2, similarly, we will go about and discuss and produce what is called an information sheet. Now, if I look at an information sheet, primarily, for the purposes of, let's say, discussing, what has been and required to be done, what we will do essentially here would be to look at, let's put it this way, discuss about various tasks by producing a Word document. So task 2 is a business function, as you can see. And in the business function, she has discussed about accounting in detail, as you can see, and the functions of HR department. Now, one of the things which I would suggest, is use pictures, in lot of, I would say, quite use pictures, images, diagrams, quite a lot, because it helps you build argument when you're doing the assignment. So if I look at the functions of HR department, I would say this is a good relevant picture which helps you build arguments by talking about what functions the HR does. Now, don't forget to mention the source, because you have to reference it later. So if I go into and mention the source, sometimes what you'll need to do is whichever picture, whatever place you have taken it from, you will have to mention the source of the of the image. And in this case, what I would say is the topic of the image, say figure or say picture 1, which is functions of HR department. And then when I talk about source, I've taken it from the website HR exams, and then the details of it, which I need to include, will be included in the references list. So HR functions, if I have to write HR functions, and this is the website, and then I would say assessed on today's date, 31/08/2022. So this is something how I would go about doing the referencing. So use plenty of pictures. It helps you build arguments, makes your assignment a bit more colorful, and also allows you to achieve the task by attempting it in a bit more detail, because you don't need to start from scratch. You can use the picture and straight away start explaining what you're going to talk about. And that helps you reduce your word limit in terms of writing, and also depicting very clearly what you're essentially presenting in terms of evidence. Now, similarly, you'll go about doing the extension activities, which the learner has done here. They've talked about the key legislations, as you can see, things like the Data Protection Act, the Health and Safety Act, the Equality and Diversity Act. We talked about the Minimum Wage Act. All these bits, has been covered in terms of legislation, and she has met the merit and the distinction criteria. Going to the accounting workshop, task 3. If you are not looking at drawing a worksheet, then you need to be able to go into Google and pull out a profit and loss sheet, which you're going to put in as a screenshot, and then do the interpretation in terms of what information you're getting from the profit and loss sheet. And that has been described, as you can see in the assignment here. Then we go to the extension activities, talking about, ratio analysis and how profit and loss and some of the financial statements help you interpret and create budgets. I don't know whether you recall, we had discussed creation of a budget. So if you're looking at attempting that task, in my discussion with you, what I'd done was I had looked at creating a budget sheet, and that budget sheet was primarily done in order to show you how we go about, looking at, let's say, creating a sample cash flow statement or a budget sheet. And this was the sheet that we had used to discuss for a small company in terms of how much profit they make, what is the business they do. And this, if you create, or use, would be useful for you to achieve the distinction task. Now, task 4 is essentially all about, theory and using the frameworks of team building, Tuckman's model, and the Dr. Belbin's team roles, and presenting that in the Word document. So here, as you can see, the learner has presented that they are working in a business, they're managing a team, and they are required to now do an analysis on their own team. So what the learner here has done is put a few team members down, what is the role they play in the team, and then They have given and drawn up a table showing what responsibility they have. They've briefly explained the responsibility, and then how do you evaluate their work in regards to work being completed. So you are basically carrying out an analysis by doing some evaluation that has been shown in the table. And then they've talked about different stages of team development, the Tuckman's model, as you can see, 5 stages: forming, norming, we talked about these stages: forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning, which have been used using an image and then explained. And then the 3 theories of motivation. She's covered Maslow's theory of hierarchy. She's covered the hygiene theory and the theory X and Y, which was the carrot and stick approach. And then different types of leadership models that we discussed, which were looking at 4 styles of leadership, the 4 basic styles. We've talked about autocratic, participated, laissez-faire, and authoritative. And then the last one being transactional and transformational leadership. Now, this bit has been covered theoretically because it talks about describe the command verb, and carry out means you have to go about doing it. That is why these tables have been created by the learner in terms of doing the assignment. So just keep that in mind when you are basically looking at presenting and creating the evidence, so that you're reading it and you're doing it in a way wherein it meets the particular criteria. Now, she hasn't done the merit and distinction activities, because it talks about applying the motivational styles by talking about a situation which she hasn't done, and then how motivational theories can benefit employees. Again, benefits of motivational theories have not been discussed, and evaluation of different leadership styles has not been done. So only past tasks have been achieved. And the last task talks about, carrying out talking about customer service and the impact of customer service on business. So this is where you will find this in Learning Outcome 6 presentation, and she has basically looked at defining the importance of customer service and the benefits of customer profiling. So she has completed and achieved task 6.1 and 6.2. Again, the merit and distinction activities have not been done, wherein it requires you to show analysis. And what is analysis? If I look at the command verb in terms of what is analysis, if I go into the analysis part, it says identify separate factors, how they're related to each other and how they contribute to the business being successful. So that means you have to talk about certain factors, which would be required for you to understand what are these factors for customer service. Things like, why customers like or want better customer service. They want it because they're buying an expensive product. They want the company is looking at creating loyalty in terms of product purchases. They're looking at selling additional products to the same customer over a point in time. They want to retain the customer. And these are some of the benefits which the company needs, understands. And that is where these points, when you mention, will actually look at, giving us the analysis. And similarly, distinction, wherein learner was required to do a bit of profiling of customers. When we talked about customer profiling, I don't know if you recall, we discussed demographic, psychographic, geographic profiling. So here, why does a company look at profiling customers? How do they go about doing the process of profiling? All those things have to be covered, in terms of achieving the distinction criteria. And then towards the end, as you can see, the learner has mentioned some references, but she hasn't, followed references in terms of doing it properly as Harvard referencing. There are some bits which have been put, but this would be a proper style of doing Harvard referencing, as I've explained to you on the document. Now, what I would suggest is, if I'm in your shoes, how do I go about doing the assignment? First of all, I'm going to basically go in and look at revising this presentation and looking at what kind of output evidence that I need to produce. Then I need to look at some of the presentations that I've got from Learning Outcome 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and then go about, creating this evidence using a PowerPoint slide and a Word document, like I've shown you how it needs to be done. So I hope this would allow you to, look at doing your assignment. And what we are looking at is that you submitting this assignment in the next 2 weeks. So today being, say, 31st of August, we are looking at this assignment being submitted to us on email by 14th September. So what is the deadline for submission of the assignment? Deadline for submission of assignment is 14 September, and this needs to be submitted on email along with the completion of assignment declaration. And you would be looking at submitting 2 documents, one PowerPoint presentation and one Word document, which will essentially be looking at, giving us the details of what you have submitted as far as the unit is concerned. And then having this kind of a, detail on the assignment definitely helps, because this gives it a bit of structure and, allows the lecturer to go into your assignment, in detail and then give you comments. Assuming we feel that you haven't met all the criteria, I would then look at giving you some comments, and that would be, for the purposes of looking at achieving this unit successfully with either a pass, merit, or a distinction grade. So insert Word, I would say page numbers in the Word document. Look at doing a line spacing of 1.5, which makes the text much more readable. As you would see here, one of the things which the learner hasn't done in the Microsoft Word, and there's a feature which is available, is that what you could do is do a spell check or a grammar check. So go into your tools and then look at the editor, opening the editor, and then do a grammar check. As you can see, there are bits and pieces which we can actually check on the document, and that would be is something which will be good, because if you proofread your document, then some places where you see things have not been applied can be changed, and this would make it much more presentable in terms of making the document professional, and obviously without any mistakes in terms of grammar. Although you're not marked for grammar, but let's not forget that this is, at this stage at level 3, you're looking at primarily understanding how assignment writing is to be done, and how formatting of the assignment is to be done, how it has to be presented, how it has to be proofread, how do you do referencing. And these bits, as you can see, it's taking me a few clicks, just quickly referring and refreshing and making it grammatically correct in terms of submitting the assignment, which would give it a much more professional outlook, that I've submitted a document which has been written professionally, grammatically correct, it has right punctuation, and has no errors, grammatical errors, as far as the English and the collation of evidence is concerned while presenting the assignment. So as you can see, it has taken a couple of minutes, but most of the work is done for you by the system. So whichever software you use, you should be able to go through by just quickly, like in the case of authors, obviously the names are nouns, so obviously we need to add them to our dictionary. As you start doing a bit more bit of work, this would improve. And as you can see, the editor score is now gone to 95%. So virtually this document has no errors. It's been now properly formatted. I would remove some extra spaces, make sure that the document that I'm presenting is something which is having a very professional outlook in terms of writing the tasks clearly, making sure that the work is organized and it is presented in a way wherein it is pleasing to the eye, and it allows the assessor to quickly refer to your piece of work and then award the pass mark, and then basically the feedback is going to be quicker, because what we see is that the work has been presented in a way which is very professional, and it does not take long for the assessor to essentially go about assessing the work, which means the turnaround time as far as the assignment is concerned is going to be much quicker, and you'd be able to move on to the next unit as you complete and achieve this particular unit. So I hope this session in terms of assignment discussion has been useful, because this is something that you're going to be doing time and again for all the other units. So I wanted this discussion on the assignment brief, to be detailed, so that when you start doing assignments on the other units, as you study them, it will make it easier for you to understand how do you go about, creating the assignment and obviously submitting the assignment within a stipulated time frame. Now, I would like to, obviously end the session today, but if there are any questions, more than happy to take and discuss. The sampler assignment that you're seeing, which I've shown you, will also be available upon Moodle just after the session. And what I'm also going to do is obviously upload the copy of this particular presentation so that you are able to, have a look at it and then, start doing your work pretty much, just after the session. We are going to be not having a session tomorrow, and we'll be looking at starting next week a new unit, which will be marketing principles. And that unit is going to be taught by, one of my colleagues, Mr. Anjum, and he would be looking at, obviously sharing, and, we will send the codes across, and he would be the one who will be actually looking at, now teaching the second unit on this particular course. So any questions at this stage? If I go to you one by one, any questions at your end, Faiz? Any questions, Ghazala? Any questions, Ira? Any questions, Mr. Aslam?
No, everything okay.
Everything okay? Understood?
Yes.
Was the session helpful?
Next class is Monday, and
next class will be next. It will not be tomorrow, Thursday. We'll look at starting a new unit, and that will be marketing principles next Wednesday.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Okay.
Good stuff. So please make sure that you're able to access Moodle and, start doing your work and assignments. If you have any questions, feel free to, obviously get back to me, and you can send us an email on LITC@UK Versity, and I'll be able to get back to you pretty much straight away with additional information if required. Okay. Good stuff. Thank you so much for attending, and I will catch up with you in the subsequent days and weeks. But for now, take care, and thanks for joining us. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.